What up, White America? It's Damon, your Latino Christian homie, here to start off with a reminder that Jesus looked a lot more like me than you. But no, we're not going to take down your white Jesus statues. As long as you promise to stop calling the cops on the homeless Jesus statues because you mistake it for an actual homeless person trying to get some sleep. Now, on this channel, we talk a lot about the difference between the theological developments developed by the colonizers in order to justify colonization, and the theological developments developed by the colonized in order to empower their struggle for freedom. But that difference goes back throughout Christian history. What Cornel West called the difference between Constantinian Christianity and Prophetic Christianity. What Frederick Douglass called the difference between the slave-holding religion of this land and the Christianity of Christ. Or what Soren Kierkegaard called the difference between Christendom and Christianity, saying one must try to reintroduce Christianity to Christendom. And honestly, that's what I'm trying to do with my channel and the community we're building. And so I see these protests and uprisings going on right now, and I see that support and participation in these protests is the Christian task. However, several white Christian prominent leaders don't see things that way. And they even see these movements for justice as antithetical to the gospel they're preaching. And here's the thing. They're right. Because the gospel they're preaching is the gospel of Constantinian Christianity, of slaveholder religion, of Christendom, preaching the theology of the colonizers, completely disconnected from the prophetic Christianity of Christ. And so many of them totally exposed themselves when they started seeing all these people taking down statues in the spirit of removing symbols of white supremacy in this country. And they thought, oh no, they're going to come for the Jesus statues next and try to get me to give up my faith. First of all, no one is trying to do any of that. And second, you really need to reevaluate your Jesus and reevaluate your faith if you think your church is the next stop on the fight against white supremacy. And so many of these white Christian leaders have been completely clueless as they're trying to figure out how to respond to this stuff. And a lot of them are now even pretending that the protests are over. And they're definitely not. They're still going strong. But some of these people have been so clueless that they've responded to the issue of white supremacy with more white supremacy. Theodore Rothrock, a Catholic priest in Carmel, Indiana, was fired by his bishop after he wrote in his church's Sunday bulletin about the Black Lives Matter protesters, saying, "The only lives that matter are their own, and the only power they seek is their own. They are wolves in wolves' clothing." Yeah, you really said that, and I can't tell if that's racist or speciesist, but it's probably both. Let's keep reading. "Wolves in wolves' clothing, masked thieves and bandits, seeking only to devour the life of the poor and profit from the fear of others. They are maggots and parasites at best, feeding off the isolation of addiction and broken families, and offering to replace any current frustration and anxiety with more misery and greater resentment." Definitely racist. And boy, this boomer's boomer wife better take away his boomer phone and make sure he doesn't download Parler, because this is disgusting. He ended up apologizing, and he said, "It was not my intention to offend anyone." Bro, it doesn't work like that. Actually, I wonder how many more incel neo-Nazis would be defending Hitler today if Hitler had simply ended Mein Kampf with the sentence, "It was not my intention to offend anyone." It's a meaningless statement after all that. Anyway, in Columbus, Mississippi, a Pentecostal pastor named Scott Volland was kicked out of his church for his statements on Black Lives Matter. And he was not kicked out by a higher-up bishop like with Theodore Rothrock, but by his own church board who voted him out. And you know what his controversial statements were that got him kicked out? He said, "Black Lives Matter," as a human fact, in a Facebook post. And his church board said, "Your agenda will not work in this church." It's like they're talking about him like he's some radical leftist calling for police abolition, a socialist revolution, and giving land back to indigenous people. When really he's just a vanilla Christian fella who wants to treat people how he wants to be treated, no matter the color of their skin. But even that is too radical of an agenda for some white Christians. Can you imagine being so racist that even the sanitized version of Martin Luther King Jr. that they teach us in elementary school in order to convince us that racism ended is too much to handle for you? These white people need Jesus. The brown one, for real. But what has especially frustrated me is seeing what Sean Feucht has been doing. Sean Feucht of Bethel Worship. Bethel Church is an extremely influential megachurch, and Bethel Worship has put out plenty of songs that are sung in evangelical churches all over the country, such as their hit single No Longer a Slave, which appropriates themes from old songs sung by African slaves in America to celebrate their freedom. Except Bethel sings, I'm no longer a slave to fear, I am a child of God. If you don't like my voice, remember I was an evangelical youth pastor, not a worship pastor, but leave a comment if you've ever sung that song in a white church before. Oh, by the way, Sean Feucht also ran for Congress in California last year and lost, of course. But his campaign ad reminded me so much of that cringe 14 words white supremacist slogan that said, we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. You know that one? Actually, I'm just going to leave this here and I'm going to show you some clips from this ad so you can see what I mean.
What is happening to the identity of America? America's not just a country. It's a legacy built on a foundation of hope and truth. If we lose our identity, how will the world learn from our greatness? Sean is taking a stand millions like you and I need to take if we are determined to better the future for our children and grandchildren. Now, he is willing to sacrifice his calling for a greater one, to restore the identity, values, and morals of this great nation. How do I know this? I'm his wife.
His wife!
And the mother of his 4 children. As a family, we are committed to this race.
Is that a double entendre, Kate?
We are committed to this race. For us, our children, and our future.
I'm Sean Feucht, and I'm running for Congress.
Man, that thing had almost as many white nationalist dog whistles as Richard Spencer's old Who Are We propaganda video.
Who are you? An identity that stretches back and flows forward for centuries. An identity you can glimpse in the face of a grandparent or your child. Our ancestors had a very strong sense of their identity. They could say, I'm a Roman, I'm a Saxon, I'm a Dane. Some could say, I'm a European. Man lives and dies for a homeland, for a people and its future. So long as we avoid and deny our identities, at a time when every other people is asserting its own, we will have no chance to resist our dispossession, no chance to make our future.
And you may say, no, Damon, he's not talking about white identity, he's talking about Christian identity. Oh, okay, well, how about you Google Christian identity and tell me what comes up, okay? So anyway, Sean Feucht teamed up with some other evangelical worship leaders and barged into these protests with praise and worship on a big old stage with loudspeakers to get people to turn away from the protests and turn to forgiveness in Jesus. Hey Siri, what does colonization look like?
And there's where the trauma happened right here, where the injustice happened right here. And now, right here on this corner, a move of the Holy Spirit's happening. People are receiving prayer, getting set free. Healing's happening. All races coming together. Wow. Asian, black, white, Indian, Latin American. Everyone's coming together.
Also, Siri, what does emotional manipulation look like again?
Watch this. Look at these tears. These beautiful tears. Watch this.
What just happened here is called
Tears.
reconciliation.
Watch this. Look at these beautiful tears. Wow.
Oh yeah, that's definitely that. Let's look at DJ Benny K's Instagram posts to see his testimonies from this revival. Here's one. He said, "Dance on injustice. Pinching myself to be right in the center of God's will to see freedom come from terrible injustice of George Floyd. Sing my city in flames to 11 straight nights of street revival services and no end date. Words are hard to articulate the transformation we're seeing. Altars are packed of people searching for truth to find the power to forgive, which can only happen by the love of Jesus and true eternal change instead of a protest." Testimonies. A black woman was ran over by a car from a racist white person. She was touched by Jesus and was baptized on the street, and her heart is being healed. What? What happened? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Okay, let's look at another one. He said, "From the tragic loss of George Floyd, daily we are seeing salvation, healing, baptisms in the street, and forgiveness extended from black and white people. Jesus is the answer, not a protest. The simplicity of the love of Jesus can bring true justice and reconciliation we all desire. Continue to pray for my wife and I and the lead team as we roll out, blah, blah, blah." Let's look at this one. Oh no. He said, "Spread love and feet to your prayers. This is true injustice and wrong on all levels. With COVID-19, things are more tender and sad, seeing businesses closed due to a potential of riots." That's the sad part. Because people have lost their minds. Oh my God. Friends, please wake up from media/left politicians who use black people to generate voters, then do nothing after the election cycle. Please follow at Real Candace Owens, who is black and speaks truth to many of us who are blinded to see. I'm reminded of Amos 5, where the prophet Amos is talking about how people go to God with their festivals and rituals and songs and still allow injustice to continue. And God says, "Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." So relevant, right? So, Sean Foyt and everyone else, while you sing Jesus, God says, "Cut the music, I want justice." But so many of these white Christian leaders don't even know what justice should look like. It's like they completely lack the imagination to picture something beyond black people going to the same church as white people who would never say the N-word. They don't understand the need for radical transformation of this entire capitalist system that thrives off of institutional racism. They also don't even understand the privileges that they take advantage of because of centuries of white supremacy in this country. That's why we see pastors like Louis Giglio say this.
We understand the curse that was slavery, white people do, and we say that was bad, but we miss the blessing of slavery, that it actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in and lived in. And so a lot of people call this white privilege, and when you say those two words, it just is like a fuse goes off for a lot of white people because they don't want somebody telling them to check their privilege. And so I know that you and I both have struggled in these days with, hey, if the phrase is the trip up, let's get over the phrase and let's get down to the heart.
Sure.
Let's get down to what then do you want to call it? And I think maybe a great thing for me is to call it white blessing, that I'm living in the blessing of the curse that happened generationally that allowed me to grow up in Atlanta.
He ended up apologizing, but I don't think he misspoke. And the reason is because white Christians have spent centuries using the word blessings to refer to the power and wealth that America has gained for white people through centuries of slavery, imperialism, the destruction and exploitation of the third world, and wealth inequality. Think about it. If only a small percentage of the planet experience what you call blessings, then you have to consider that the God of this planet is not really a part of that. Something that I also find really interesting is that Bernice King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, was supposed to be on that stage, a part of that panel with Louis Giglio, but she ended up having to cancel. And so I guess Louis looked to his left and saw his friend and the CEO of Chick-fil-A, no idea why he was invited, and looked to his right and saw Lecrae, who is black, but at this point has been known for letting a lot of racism slide, including the later white blessings bit that would occur that night. And Louis said, yeah, I think the three of us could tackle this panel on racism in America. And Louis did say that he was still learning and beginning to understand these issues. However, if that's where you're at, then you shouldn't platform yourself as an authoritative voice on these issues. And that's what he did by putting himself at the center of that panel. And I would have that to say to a lot of white Christian leaders right now. If you are just beginning to understand this stuff, do not platform yourself as an authoritative voice on these issues. But they don't listen. I mean, we're in the middle of coronavirus and governors are still saying that people shouldn't physically go to church. So you even have the opportunity to take a break and learn some stuff. And yet they refuse. Instead, they end up just preaching unity before considering what justice looks like and other awful, ignorant takes as their Facebook Live filters glitch out on them.
I don't know if everybody else is having the issue with it or if it's just my computer or what, but it's slow. I have filters going on.
So, what should we be doing? Go to some protests and go with the flow and don't try to make it your own thing. And please don't go there to evangelize to people. Stop that. Wrong place, wrong time, and extremely disrespectful. Go and be a part of the protests and practice solidarity with the people there. I would also challenge you to not even tell anyone you went. Just because of how familiar I am with preacher culture, I know there definitely are preachers out there who probably went to some of these protests just to use it as sermon material. Don't do that. Don't make it about you. Also, read some James Cone, the founder of Black Liberation Theology. I promise, he's not as scary as Allie Beth Stuckey makes it seem. She's just really, really ignorant.
Black liberation theology so closely mirrors Nation of Islam, which we know is rooted in something that is not godly, that is not biblical, and that is evil. Let me be clear about this, just with his own words. James Cone was not a Christian.
He's actually one of my favorite Christians. But I guess the prophetic Christianity of Christ has become completely unrecognizable to those who are deep in Constantinian slaveholder Christendom of the colonizers. But you can set yourself free from that. And you could start by reading the book The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Cone. Trust me, that'll change your life. Now, make sure you subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitch, join the Discord in the description, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Shout out to my patrons already over there. Balaj Vince Seidel, Blessed Are the Poor, Stephen Harp, Jan Jensu Lapona, Alex Albatross, Angela Mamel, The Kami Christian, David, James Finlay, Julianne King, Keegan James, Kristen Mouse, Marina Black, Mimi McGann, New Transcendentalist, Onion, Peter A., Peter John Blake, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, Sam Osakwe, and everyone else. I really appreciate the support. Thank you. So, remember, Black Lives Matter. And as Scott Vollen said, as a human fact. And another human fact, whatever that means, is that we really need to dismantle white supremacy, even in the church. Thank you. See you later.